Peace to your home. Naturally Romania, naturally Armenia, naturally the list of statements from grandma where she tried to downplay things and show that, well, it's not all so clear-cut. What we know, we know. What we don't know, we don't know. And of course, the bullshit in Iran, which just never happens. In today's episode live, the main news of global madness. Subscribe, watch until the end, and think. No matter how you spin it, darkness will not overcome the light. So, the situation where Putin comes out to the journalists and stands before them has only happened a couple of times.
It's impossible to name specific dates in the context of ongoing hostilities. It's not just reckless, it's simply, well, that's almost never done, and I won't do it either. You mentioned there were strikes on Starobelsk, and now I'm being briefed. This is being done, and I won't do it. So, as you said, there were strikes on Starobelsk, and now I'm being briefed, and now there are attempts to strike Russian territory. Yes, of course, the Westerners are supplying them with drones. What could be simpler? You screw it together, press a button, and it flies. But when I said that, well, it only means one thing, that we need to strengthen our air defense system, and we are doing this and will continue to do so. As for my statement that, in my opinion, things are moving toward a conclusion, I made that statement not just for the sake of it, but based on an analysis of the situation on the battlefield. And there, our troops are advancing in all directions. Well, you see it yourself every single day.
He says it's reckless to name deadlines. So there's no need to name any deadlines. That's exactly why they plan to take Kyiv in 2 or 3 days. It was reckless to start a war without buying a calculator at the store and figuring out how we would wage this war, and what if the war didn't go as planned. I won't get tired of saying this. That was what was reckless. And it's reckless to name deadlines. He said it before, and now he's making excuses. He says, Westerners, why are Ukrainians so successful at attacking our oil refineries? But he didn't say it exactly like that. That's just what he meant. He says, Westerners are sending Ukraine drones from all over the world, and they just assemble them with a screwdriver, press a button, excuse me, and off they go. First of all, the Westerners themselves are starting to gather now. That's first. And second, if it's so easy, then why don't you learn to crank out these drones yourselves? All right, Ukraine, no technology, no brains, nothing at all. Ukraine has nothing, judging by the statements of that bold old lady. So why are things so bad in Russia then? Why did you have to shout, Iran, comrades, little ayatollahs, help us, dear friends, we need a Shahed moped. We need a Shahed moped because we're having a bit of trouble bombing Ukraine ourselves. If it's so easy, why didn't you do it yourselves? And even if it's difficult, why didn't you do it? And now, as she says, you have to explain this to your own riffraff. Why, as we'll discuss today about the internet shutdown and the fact that certain kinds of geese are still flying towards their targets and reaching them. And it needs to be explained. And of course, all of this is being sent to them by their Western partners. They just assemble it with screwdrivers and send it all over Russia. He says, we are strengthening the air defense system. How? Well, I showed how. They're putting air defense systems on rooftops in Moscow. But somehow, just as they're about to strengthen the defenses, bam, something hits that very spot again. It's kind of strange the way you're strengthening the defenses. Our troops are advancing in all directions. Well, unfortunately, there are sections of the front where the Russian army is advancing at the cost of enormous losses and meat grinder assaults. But there are also areas where they are retreating, only no one talks about that. If I'm not mistaken, the Alexandrovsk direction, something like that, I saw it in a report, but he doesn't talk about it. He shrugs it off and says, well, it's a little bit different.
They reported that some incident supposedly happened with our drone. If you would be so kind as to repeat it for me once more, I would be very grateful to you. I'm speaking without jokes or irony, and then I would comment on it based on what I know. So, Anton Morozov, TASS agency, here's the question. Europeans talk a lot. No, it's clear what they're saying. So why didn't they shoot it down? Why didn't they shoot down the drone that, I don't even understand, is connected to Russia, the one that flew in there? Can you hear me or not? I don't even understand what this is about. Right before I came in, someone asked me, did you know that a drone flew into Romania? I said, I don't know what kind of drone it was. Well, tell me, what information is being reported in the media that it's ours? They're claiming that the drone crashed into a residential building in Romania. Yes, In Romania, they're saying that it's a Russian drone. Who in Romania is saying that it's a Russian drone? Many people in Europe are making that claim. Many means no one. Specifically, Ursula von der Leyen made that statement. I don't know, Ms. von der Leyen wasn't in Romania. She didn't examine the remains of that drone. It is impossible for anyone to definitively state what the specific point of origin of this or that aircraft is until a thorough and comprehensive forensic examination of the aircraft has been conducted. After all, we know that certain Ukrainian long-range drones have accidentally or intentionally flown into the airspace of Finland and into Poland and into some of the neighboring Baltic countries as well, Ukrainian.
This is yet another vivid example of how that old KGB, lying, disgusting hag shows off. Show us who is saying this. Give us the conclusion. And then bam, just a few hours later, these NATO comrades issue a statement and say, it was a Russian drone. The president of Romania comes out and says, a Russian drone entered under the influence of Ukrainian air defense. Well, on the one hand, he told the truth, but on the other hand, as I said yesterday, soon they'll say, Ukraine is to blame for everything. So the Kremlin launches it. But at the same time, everything is kind of sluggish. It's all happening very sluggishly. No complaints, no reaction at all. They didn't even activate their NATO Article 4. Just get together and chat, that's all. Guys, so what are we going to do next? Well, now it flew in. Was it by accident or not? Under the influence of Ukrainian electronic warfare or not? Because of air defense or not? But what if it wasn't? What if this is another reconnaissance by combat? What's stopping it? How would you check? How would you prove it? You can't. And that's why, at least, let's get together a little, have a chat, and see what happens next. No, it's just Russia by accident. Bombing Ukraine is allowed. Romania, but it flew into Romania by accident. It's complete idiocy. And of course, how could we not quote what Medvedev said? He quoted this Romanian, let's say, surprise from the loving Kremlin authorities. Look, here's the situation. He wrote on his page, Euro impotents are making a fuss about some drone hitting a residential building in Romania. Of course, we need to figure out whose it is. They've already figured out whose it is. It's Russian. But in any case, he understood that it was a Russian drone. All EU countries need to shut up about this topic. European states are direct participants in the war with Russia, and no one disputes that anymore. Yes, they're fighting through the hands of the DPR fighters, but what difference does that make to us? After all, European UAVs, spare parts for them, and other weaponry, not to mention intelligence data, take part in attacks on our country every day. As a result of their actions, residential buildings where our peaceful citizens live are being damaged. So let them get ready. This will continue to happen. There is a war going on. Citizens of EU countries, as the population of warring states, will not be able to sleep peacefully, especially in those places where UAV production facilities for the needs of Ukrainian DPR formations are located. It's not just some barking dog on Skabiva's show coming out. It's what's his position, the Secretary of the National Security Council. That's effectively the second most important person in the state. Mishustin is kind of there too. And so is that other guy, but still, it's purely nominal. Those Western comrades love to check the right box everywhere so that things work exactly as they want. Everything is clean according to the law. And he says, you're done for. We'll be launching every day. We'll be Romania, Poland. I'm not even mentioning the Baltic countries. There's a completely different event being prepared there. So what? They can't activate Article 4, get together and just talk. They say, well, it was Ukrainian electronic warfare that worked. It was Ukrainian air defense forces jamming it. Where does that even go? And of course, the drunk woman comes out and starts showing off. She says, shut your trap. It was flying, it is flying, and it will keep flying. He openly admitted, without hiding or concealing anything, that whether Ukrainian air defense or electronic warfare works or not, Russian drones will keep flying into Europe. And so to speak, we're waiting for comments. We're waiting for a response from our responsible Western partners. Let's move on to the most interesting part.
Economic matters. Everything needs to be calculated, examined carefully, and a decision must be made. I've already mentioned this. The crisis in Ukraine originally traced its origins back to a period marked by persistent efforts to pursue membership in the European Union. We weren't against it, but we said, listen, for example, the phytosanitary standards are completely different. This is access to...
Let me translate this into simple, understandable Russian. In Armenia, as I understand it, people understand Russian. Sorry for the tautology. Next will be Armenia. Yesterday, Shoigu spoke about this in somewhat veiled terms. Today, Putin comes out and talks about it openly, honestly, without hiding or concealing anything. What did he say? In Ukraine, everything started the same way as it is starting today in Armenia. Everything you see happening in Ukraine today will also happen to you in Armenia. Naturally, we won't be able to capture Armenia. Naturally, not everything will work out for us. Naturally, you have friends. You are searching and you have already found friends even among Azerbaijan. In the person of Azerbaijan, excuse me. And you have many more friends, but conquering you and making you happy will not work. But turning your life into hell, just as we did in Donbass, that we are fully capable of, that we will succeed at. And here, it's not just somehow, somewhere, with someone, as Alexander Yakovlevich Rosenbaum used to sing. Here, the guy is speaking directly. You are starting to behave the way Ukraine behaved. Ukraine has this today. You will have the same. Someone might say to me, well, don't exaggerate. He just tried to scare us, said it as if it means nothing. And the grumbling of old ladies when Roskomnadzor starts banning the import of certain goods into the Russian Federation, none of that really matters. It's all whatever. But according to the Bot Blocker project, a separate network of accounts has been discovered on Social Network X, working exclusively on the Armenian topic. This is a rare case. In recent years, Russian structures have only set up such a specialized network once before. Excuse me, they deployed it before the elections in Germany. Coincidence? I don't think so. Well, take a look. I won't show any more episodes. But what's the point? It was described very interestingly, let's say, by comrades who understand this stuff. Old accounts were silent for years, then received new names and suddenly started publishing materials against Pashinyan in Armenian, Russian, English, and French. Why French? Because now there are friends in France. Some of the accounts are disguised as users from the USA. Notably, the bots are not promoting any specific candidate. They need to blur the agenda so that later the Kremlin can install its own person. But even all this is nonsense. Although money has already been thrown in, the situation is working. The destabilization, as they say, has begun. Everything is going according to the established playbook. First it was the KGB, now it's the FSB. But that's not the most interesting part. The most interesting and sad thing is something else. Western officials state Russia is preparing a $50 million plan to transport up to 100,000 pro-Russian voters to Armenia to influence the elections and attempt to remove Pashinyan. To do this, the Russian Federation is launching disinformation campaigns and supporting the pro-Russian candidate Samvel Karapetyan. I don't know whether it's Karapetyan or not. That's not important. What matters is something else. The Kremlin will do everything, but now don't forget one thing. They've learned from Ukraine, as regrettable, disgusting, and hypocritically ambiguous as that may sound right now. They have learned a lot. They realized where they were wrong, where they made mistakes, and how they need to behave differently today. And now there are bot farms, the import of Russian-speaking citizens who supposedly need protection. Are there Russian-speaking citizens in Armenia who need to be protected? I think in every post-Soviet country, you'll find enough idiots like that. Well, they exist. Well, they exist, and there's nothing you can do about it, really. How so? All right, I was about to give a not very good example. And the Kremlin is starting to stir things up in this direction. And what's most interesting is that they're not hiding or disguising it, but openly calling things by their names, comrades, so to speak. It will be like in Ukraine, unless, of course, you come to your senses. But what does it mean to come to your senses? How are we supposed to live? Live like Sizran or like Samara? People from Tajikistan write to me, I correspond with them. He says, damn, I come to visit my relatives.